Hi everyone, Susan Corbett, Custom Machine Quilter. Today we're going to be quilting this beach panel quilt. Isn't that refreshing to look at? It's a bunch of, well, there's that one panel and then there's all these other little parts. So it's minimal piecing and a whole lot of delight. So as you know, as I want to do, here I am outlining the print. And, one of the panels here is a bunch of sand dollars. So I'm just outlining the center sand dollar part and then the perimeter. And just, going from one to the other, looking for little ways to hop from one to the other so that they connect in a seamless way to minimize all the stops and starts. By this point, I had stabilized the quilt. I ditch quilted all over the place. And that large panel, the beach scene, that's such a big piece of fabric with no seams in it. So I took great care not only to not stretch it, but to ease it in kind of. Because fabric stretches and panels have a way of just expanding right and left. It would be a really good idea to baste it, but I don't like to baste because then you have to take out the basting stitches. So I put in a lot of pins or make a lot of thread changes so I can quilt as much of the surface on the frame as I can before scrolling up. So I've ditch quilted in between the borders and the blocks. And so the section I'm working on right now is with this natural colored thread. There's only a few thread changes on this quilt, not a whole lot. And I like to try and quilt as much as I can of the quilt with the predominant color thread before switching, but that isn't always possible. And this is just looking so good. I knew that was going to be a winner, and I love it. Not much effort for a big payoff here. So there's been more outlining in all different kinds of parts of the quilt. But nothing very tedious. I guess the most tedious part was there's two panels of like pebbles, rocks on the beach. That was fun to do. It was a lot more detailed than I'm adding here. I couldn't help but go back in between each little rock and, do a little bit of dimensional quilting to get them to leap up out of the quilt. And you'll see pictures of that here coming up. So it's looking good. With this part. Oh, see how good that looks? Oh, I love it. Okay. Now in this little frame, I love to quilt the frame. I don't leave those blank. I think that's a missed opportunity to leave a frame blank. This is an opportunity to delight the eye with one more little detail. So what I'm doing in here is a freehand sea glass meander. The fabric is a print of sea glass. So I'm not outlining the print here. I'm quilting, I guess you could say like pebbles, except they're irregular shapes. Some are kind of squarish, some are oblong, others are kind of round, but I'm trying to mimic sea glass shapes in here. So I'm disregarding the print on the fabric and just, out there having fun. What thread did I use in here? You could go with the blue. You could go with, some kind of a green. I think I might have used just a natural colored thread in here. because it wasn't going to show up that much. So why is it worth doing? I just think it is. That's just a custom quilting thing. I think it's all worth doing. I think it paid off really well. As you can see on the left, I've quilted some in that large panel, and that's just, all of it. The panel in the sky and on the beach is a ground meander. How can you quilt a ground meander in the sky? It looks like the sky on sky fabric, and it looks like the ground on ground fabric. It depends on the context. So how is that easy? Well, once you learn how to do it, it's kind of easy. There are moments of, I guess, indecision where you think, does this look like anything? Is this just a bunch of irregular shapes? Well, that's a matter of opinion. In the end, I always think it looks a whole lot better than I think it does initially. So this frame is going pretty quickly. I don't know, it might strike some people as being a little tedious, but I was amazed at how fast that went. And here I'm actually outlining the print on the fabric in this panel. This was much more time consuming. And I think I might have switched to a blue thread here. I don't know. So here, let's just enjoy the mesmerizing effect of seeing the quilting happen for a minute. The panel beneath this one is the one I referenced earlier with all those little seashells and sand, and so that as long as you're using a batting with a little bit of loft, when you quilt densely around a shape like the sand and the seashells, oh, see, look at all that texture you get. Whoa, I love that part. I think that's really gorgeous. Okay, so here I switched to a little bit of a darker thread. It's just a beige, and I outlined the shells. You know, I went over this a few times, made several passes because I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. So I quilt the parts that I do know what I'm going to do, and then come back and pick the rest up later. The color goes in and out, so I picked a thread that would look good on all of them, because I can't stop and change threads for every little piece. I mean, I guess you could, but I chose not to. So I'm just outlining and ground meandering and adding some little baby stippling here and there. And the more you do, the more it looks better and better. That does not mean quilt very heavily. I'm just saying the more complete it is, the better it tends to look. I think the quilting, one of the reasons I love it so much is because this is how you bring the quilt to life, adding all that dimension. I love the payoff. There will always come a time when I'm like, okay, so what do I do now? And I'm kind of out of ideas. But if you hang in there, some thought will pop into your head, and, you know, I can try this, and if it doesn't work, I can rip that out and do it over again, but most times I don't have to. By compressing this area of background, it's going to make the shells look a whole lot better. And I don't have to stick with one level of density. I can change. Some can be larger than others. Here, I was on the fence about what to do with that starfish. Should I go back in there and add, you know, like quilt in the very middle of it? And in the end, I did. Just a little bit right in that dark center. And now I can do some more ground meandering, just to get from one place to another and get it quilted. And then outline some more while I'm pondering what I want to do. How much detail to add to the shells or not. I decided to go add some rings to that long shell because I think that'll make it look better. This is the second one of these I've done for this client. She was very happy with the first one. This one didn't come out exactly alike, and that's totally okay. It does not have to. Why not quilt an overall just to get this done in a, you know, much more inexpensively and in a lot less time? Because it wouldn't be near as charming. This client loves the beach. She goes every fall, or end of summer, I guess. So this is going to hang in her home. All right, so here I'm quilting with an eye toward managing the fullness, this big unquilted space here. I had to ease the fullness in a little bit. So here all I'm doing is following the contours in the print. Just in case you're wondering, how did you end up with that weird shape? I was kind of wondering the same thing. This is where I was having to think, what am I going to do next? Because there's a lot less here in the print that's already defined. So I stopped and thought about it. This is where it helps to go take a break, get a drink of water or something, and come back to it a little tiny bit later with a fresh eye. Breaks are helpful. Here you're seeing the thread contrast. And that's fine, as long as the contrast isn't too high. It'll look natural. I got that starfish taken care of while I'm deciding what I'm going to do next. Okay, here's where we stand and admire and evaluate. Does it need more? Does it not need more? Am I done? Shall I move on to the next thing? Yes, let's move on to the next thing. I've changed thread color, I didn't want to add too much contrast. I don't want to take away from the panel. I want to enhance the panel. So I had already used the light colored thread on the light parts of this sky, the clouds and such. And I think this is a variegated thread where there's like a medium blue and some light blue. There's no real dark navy, which I think would be really distracting here. So I'm just adding some more, and this is where I'm quilting fairly intuitively. I really can't tell you how to do this. See, I'm not even sure I'm doing it properly. I'm just doing what I think is the right thing. I'm adding as much quilting as what looks like it needs. But of course, that's a matter of opinion that will differ from one person to the next. To get from one place to the other, I just crossed over a light part. You know, just one line of stitching across the clouds is not going to hurt anything. So that's okay. Now let's get the rest of this stuff. This is fun. It's fun and kind of relaxing if you're not all nervous about what to do where. And it's really satisfying to quilt the big empty spaces into something that I hope is good. Some areas where there's a whole lot of quilting, not a whole lot, but you know, where I've backtracked over what I've done before, that's going to create depth. And it's good if you want depth in certain places. We're almost done. Really, this is just a big type of echo, really, when you get right down to it. Echoing serves lots of great purposes. Most of the quilting is horizontal here. Why don't I use some vertical? Well, I do every once in a while. Where I'm stopping and turning back to go the other direction, that can be really rounded or it can be sharp. It just depends on what's going on. Are we done yet? Not quite. I was going to leave that part blank, and then I decided it looks odd unquilted. So I went back and filled in a little bit and was much happier for it. I thought I'd already quilted this part. Usually I don't spot those things until after I've already taken it off the frame. So that's a custom quilting thing for sure. Right when you think you're done, you're not. Okay, on to the outer border. I love it when the print says, "Quilt me like this." We have no need to gild this lily, so all I'm doing is putting lines over the existing lines that are already there. I don't mind the increment. You know, I could have gone back there and added a whole lot more detail, but I didn't see any real need. I'm using that same, the darker of the beige threads. I'm quilting either right in that brown line or right next to it, and I'm freehanding this. Wow, years ago, the first time I heard that I could freehand a straight line, I didn't believe it. But you get some experience quilting, and after a certain point you think that's not that big of a deal. And the reason it's not a big deal on this quilt is because I don't need precision here by any stretch of the imagination. Those look like boards. They're rough. They look like they've been exposed to the elements. So there's nothing precious or precise about them. Every so often, freehanding it, you know, especially going right here, right over the ditch, that may start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I can always switch, get that ruler back out, and use that as my guide. And that just varies from moment to moment and day to day. Some days I feel nice and steady, and other days I just really don't. So it doesn't really, well, if the quilting starts to look, you know, really irregular, and if I'm in and out of that ditch a whole lot, then I'll grab that ruler and aim to not be so haphazard. But this was a really quick way to get that border done. And it looks really good. And this client likes me to quilt the date on her quilt, so I chose a plank and that's where I put it. In a contrasting thread. And so for the sashing, I used this very familiar design I'm sure you've seen I don't know how many times, in part because I can run it around the perimeter and then branch off of it easily to fit it in with the horizontal strips. So that works out nicely. So there's the quilt. That went pretty fast, and it's just a delightful beach quilt. Thanks so much for watching.